Hello and welcome to Table for One. Ian Fairholm, I think you are our first person from England.
Wow.
Right? We've had other countries.
For Table for One, yeah, I believe so.
We've had Canada, but we've never had England. So welcome. Thank you for juggling time zones with us and for picking this film. You chose Paperhouse from 1988, a movie that I had never even heard of, much less seen. So that's always a treat. Please let us know what it's about.
Yeah, it's, as you say, a 1988 film. It's kind of quite hard to define because it has elements of being a sort of kids film, but it's also a bit of a horror film as well. It's directed by Bernard Rose, who's probably most famous for directing Candyman, and this was a film he made before Candyman, and it was based on this film that Clive Barker got him interested in it. And it's a film based on a novel. It's based on a children's novel, and it's about a young girl called Anna. And Anna is sort of at the cusp of sort of not quite adolescent. She's kind of probably about 11 years of age. She's at school. She has a mother and a father, but she doesn't see her father very often. Her father's off at work quite a lot, so she doesn't see him very often. And she has a slightly spiky relationship with her mother a little bit, I think, maybe. She's starting to test the boundaries a little bit. She's a bit brattish as a child as well, sort of quite bright, and she's quite interested in art as well. And she spends quite a lot of time drawing pictures. And towards the start of the film, it's her birthday. She's at school. She gets into trouble at school, and then she faints. Sort of there's this question about whether or not she faints because she's faking it, or whether it's real or not. But actually, as the film progresses, she does get a bit more unwell, and she keeps having these fainting episodes or these sleeping episodes. And then she kind of, when she dreams these kind of slightly strange fantasy environments that seem to be related to the drawings that she's making. So she draws a house, and when she goes into her dream state, she sort of dreams this kind of slightly strange looking house. And she also draws a boy in the house as well. And this boy turns up in her dreams as well. And it's kind of flips between the dreams and reality. And in reality, she has, the illness and the relationship with her mother. There's also some interesting stuff about her relationship with her father as well. But the main point of the film really is these dreams that she has, where she has these drawings, and the things that she draws in real life then seem to come true inside the film itself. And she develops a relationship with this boy called Mark, who exists in her dreams, but he has a slightly different relationship with reality than she does. So for her, she knows when she's awake and she knows when she's in this strange reality. But when she asks him about being in this reality, where is he when she's awake, where is he? And he says, I'm always here. And he's got illness as well. It's not exactly clear what's going on there, but he's ill as well. There's something wrong with him. And she starts making friends with her doctor, and her doctor sort of tells her about another patient, this boy called Mark. And so she kind of works out that the boy in the dream is also the boy who in reality is another patient at this doctor as well. And so it sort of develops quite interestingly, and it sort of becomes a horror film. There are certain parts of it that are quite kind of a little bit kind of scary and eerie and creepy. And there's one particular jump scare about halfway through the film, which is genuinely very, very effective. And you can kind
with
of
the dad.
Yeah, exactly. That is really quite chilling. So that's kind of the summary of it. And I don't want to give any more away, but that's what
you can. It's your video.
I'm so used to not giving spoilers away, but
whatever you want to say is fine. If you want to post this somewhere and you don't want to spoil, that's totally up to you. But if this is just for your enjoyment, spoil away. We've seen the movie.
That's true. Yeah. But anyway, so how do you think? Is there anything I've missed out there? Do you think?
I think you got a lot of it.
No, that's what happens. I had actually seen this movie when it was new, when it came out.
Oh.
Yeah. I was very hungrily devouring up whatever indies were going on in the late 80s. And this was one of the last gasps of Vestron films in the US, which had made a huge amount of money on Dirty Dancing and then just sort of frittered it away and ceased to exist within a few years. but yeah, that jump scare stayed with me for years. I would think when people talk about like scariest moments movies, I'm like, oh, there's this part where there's a picture of Ben Cross and then suddenly he leans forward, and you can't describe it to make it scary, but you see it. It's just like, But yeah, no, it was a film that I remembered fondly, and it was cool getting to see it again. We always complain about British actors being so good at American accents and coming over here to take our jobs. But Glenn Headley's British accent, I thought was passable to my stone ears.
Yeah, so apparently she originally recorded it with an American accent, and they actually asked her to dub over it.
Oh, wow, interesting.
So it is her English accent, and it's certainly not bad for an English accent, but it's a little bit stilted, I think. Maybe knowing that it's been recorded over the top of the original one, it feels a bit stilted occasionally. So I don't think it's her acting or her accent. It's just that the recording process, I think, makes it feel a little bit stilted and awkward occasionally.
That makes sense. Yeah, because like you're seeing her mouth move sometimes, and it almost like doesn't match up sometimes. And so now that you're telling me this, that makes total sense.
Yeah. And Ben Cross is really interesting as well, because obviously about 7 years earlier, he was doing Chariots of Fire and
right.
Huge career step and everything. The British are coming and all that kind of stuff, whatever. But it's kind of an odd role for him to be doing, really, because
it's so weird. The two leads of Chariots of Fire, like Ben Cross, winds up playing a lot of vampires, and movies like this, and Ian Charleson came out of like Derek Jarman land, like he's in Jubilee, died of AIDS. So it's like the two stars of this like very kind of forthright, tweedy, Oscar-winning British movie had like very divergent career paths going in and going out of it,
So Ian, was this movie big in England in the 80s? Like, were you a teenager when this came out, and was this big then?
So in 1988, I don't remember it at all, and I don't think it probably got a very limited cinematic distribution, but it was shown on one of our terrestrial television channels, Channel 4, which was quite known for showing lots of films, particularly British films. And they had a horror season, and this was featured as part of a horror season. And I watched it, I would guess probably early 1990s, probably about 91, 92, 93, something like that. So I was about 17 or 18 or something. And I watched it with my mum, actually, because my mum, sadly departed mum 5 years ago, but she used to like horror a lot, and so we used to watch. It was like a weird kind of bonding ritual. My mother and I used to watch horror films together.
That's cool.
So it was part of that kind of series, and that's partly why I think I had some affection for it, particularly because I remember watching it and we both enjoyed it, and also because I think it's obviously it's about sort of parents and children. That's quite a big part of the film as well. But yeah, I remember we really enjoyed it. And so, as you say, it's got some certain images that really stick with you. And actually, I was surprised watching it again for the first time in many, many years that I actually remembered quite a lot of it. The visual style, the sort of production, it's all kind of came back to me. I was
going to ask you, what did you think this time around? And I'm with you that there are movies that we see as kids that for some reason, like the lines or the beats or a piece of music just gets embedded in your brain. And you're like, oh my God, how do I still know this? Like, I can't recall what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can tell you big chunks of dialogue from like Seems Like Old Times, the Neil Simon movie. So I don't know why that's like that, but the brain's a weird thing. I'd never seen this. I had never heard of it, but it feels very much like it's in the tradition of a movie like The Wizard of Oz or the movie like Time Bandits, where like a dream or like a fantasy world is a heightened version of reality. And increasingly there's a blurring here of what's real and what's in her imagination. Is she truly bringing this world to life with her drawing? Is this merely an escape to cope with the absence of her father? The fact that her father is such a monstrous figure in her dreams is so terrifying. It looks very low tech in terms of the visual effects, but when you finally, the first shot when you see him and he's silhouetted against the dark clouds and like the horizon's very high and there he is, like it's a really startling image in a very minimalist way. But then when you see him and his eyes are like burning, it's terrifying. This is what she thinks of her dad. But I think also just the realism of her being kind of snotty, I enjoyed very much. And I feel like movies now don't depict kids like that anymore. This is something that we talked about when we discussed The Bad News Bears, how foul-mouthed those kids are, how inappropriate those kids are. This is how kids really talk. And now there's such a heightened kind of quippy cutesiness to the way that kids talk in movies that when you see a 11-year-old girl just being rude to her mom, because as you say, she's pushing it to see what she can get away with, that feels so refreshing and so true,
And there's something very Secret Gardenish about her relationship with Mark, and that she's trying to get him to walk. She's trying to get him, make him better and get him outside. But yeah, crossed with this whole sort of weird dream thing. A movie I kept thinking about while I was watching this again that I think this is much better than, but I wasn't one of its fans, was it A Monster Calls? Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, this is kind of going for the same stuff, and I think doing it in a much more sort of fascinatingly inside a kid's mind way, not just because the kid's attitude definitely is refreshingly, irritating, but I do love the idea of, when you take a kid's drawing and turn it into a three-dimensional object and the windows are not the right size and, the legs that are standing on the stairway or whatever, just like her objects being drawn with being manifested with the same kind of lack of perspective that she has is fun to watch.
Yeah. It was interesting you were talking about the imagery of it and also kind of influences on other films and stuff, because I think the director said that the scene with Ben Cross, the one you described, Christy, he actually took from Night of the Hunter.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but also I think that Guillermo del Toro really liked this, and he used it as one of the inspirations for Pan's Labyrinth as well.
And also Scans,
the dream world of it, the escape of the dream world, which is also nightmarish at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, that's really and that's good. Actually, and this is sort of the in-between point between Spirit of the Beehive, which is another movie that Del Toro points to as influence, and Pan's Labyrinth. I think they're all of a piece.
Yeah. I like how she learns, as you say, with the legs and with the ice cream machine. I drew an ice cream machine, but I forgot cones. So how she fine tunes it. She's, as you say, Ian, she's obviously a very smart girl, very very bright girl. But the way that she learns quickly. I love the way this movie is shot, because again, it's probably very low budget, but they achieve a lot. Bernard Rose achieves a lot with just perspective. And I kept thinking about, Ian, have you seen The Fabelmans?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay,
yes.
The scene at the end where Sammy Fabelman goes to see John Ford, and he tells him when the horizon's up here, it's interesting. When the horizon's down here, it's interesting. When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit. Because there's a shot of the dad with the horizon up here, and then there's a shot of the lighthouse. Every time you see the lighthouse, the horizon's way down here, and the lighthouse is really imposing. So I think even just in perspective and camera angles, he achieves so much with mood and just to set the emotion of the moment. So
and he films the real world in such a kind of grimly rainy Mike Lee sort of way, or Ken Loach even. Then it makes the fantasy sequences pop that much more, as a contrast to, her actual surroundings.
Yeah. And that low angle shot inside the house of all the candles on the floor, that's really effective too. That's not a whole lot. That's a whole bunch of candles on the floor and a door is open. And as they get whooshed out, that mood is so terrifying. So then, Ian, what do you think is really happening here? Or do we even need to parse it out?
It's because the original author of the novel was a psychologist, and I'm a psychologist as well. That's my day job basically.
Okay.
So I was quite interested in the fact that it feels kind of psychologically real in lots of ways and things and stuff. And I guess there's probably a sort of, you might consider a kind of Freudian type thing going on, particularly about the relationship between how she views her father, which is quite interesting. So a lot of it is about her growing up. I think it's maybe comparable to something like Spirited Away, that she experiences a transition. She goes from being quite self-centered at the start of the film, but starts to kind of, learn more about others and other people's needs and things like that and stuff. And obviously it's not, the relationship between her and Mark isn't sexual, but obviously it is the first kind of, boy relationship she kind of has and stuff. And there's the kiss towards the end, and
it's very sweet,
kind of sweet. So there's that, but it's also interesting because in the original novel, the stuff with the father isn't there. So this was
Oh.
brought into the film. So the screenwriter and Bernard Rose wanted to bring this in, and I think that element is really interesting because although there's no suggestion that the father is cruel as such, but he's drunk in the photograph. They talk about him being drunk.
Oh.
Yeah, they mentioned his drinking problem.
Yeah, and there is a sort of sense in which he's a bit aloof and a bit, and so it's difficult to know how much of it is her kind of interpreting what's going on in the dream, or whether or not she does have unconsciously some concerns or anxieties about her father. And I think, as you say, the representation of the father as this monster figure is really, really chilling. Because that's the one thing you're not supposed to see your parents as, isn't it? You're not supposed to see your parents as monsters. You're supposed to see them as people you trust and love and adore. And she really creates a very, very, very scary portrayal of this. And when he says, I'm blind or something like that and stuff, and the ramifications of that, it's just really chilling. So I think you can sort of, at some level, you can take it kind of literally. They think some of the things she learns and some of the things she knows she couldn't really have known without the dreams happening. But there's also a lot about her inner world and about how she represents the parents and how she represents other people and how she starts to kind of develop empathy and things like that. So even when she first meets Mark and Mark says, I can't walk, and her first thinking is, oh, I didn't draw any legs. And so it's like she's very, very kind of self-centered about things, but obviously she kind of realizes that he has his own life, his own kind of role to play and stuff. So I think it's partly about the kind of maturing process. I think with the sort of the Wizard of Oz comparison and the Pan's Labyrinth companion, it's partly about learning about the realities of the world and learning about your position in the world and learning about your relationships with people, learning how you can use imagination to escape from the world, but also how it doesn't completely save you from the realities of the outside world as well. So I think it's fascinating as a psychological reflection, but also the fact that the screenwriter and the director brought in things that weren't even in the original novel, I think is quite fascinating. And actually that component seems to work particularly well.
Yeah, she's this lonely only child. That makes sense. That she's got all day in her room and her mom's busy working and can't take her to riding lessons and her dad's out of town for work. And so she's just got all this time on her hands. There was no YouTube, there were no video games really. So, she's got time to just draw and think and play in her own dark inner wonderland. Do you guys know what happened to the actor who played Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Yeah.
It makes that last shot where he's waving at her and smiling outside the lighthouse so freaking sad.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I think part of what this movie is about her making it okay for him to die, but also making it okay for herself to live. Like that she can exist in the real world and not in this fantasy, and that she can cope with, her father ideally improving himself and proving himself to her as a parent after having slipped, and building a relationship with her mother. And as you said, being a more empathetic person. But yeah, no, that was so tragic to read. And then the girl, this was her Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. She did this one and done.
Yeah.
I wonder why that is.
Well, I think apparently the director spoke to her many, many years after making the film. He didn't have anything to do with it. And then she contacted him out the blue, having seen the film for the first time in years. And he sort of said, well, why didn't you do more? You were really good. You were a really good actress. And apparently she said, well, I made a good film. I didn't think I could do a better one than that. And so I left it at that. So, yeah, I kind of... it's quite rare that happens, isn't it? I mean, often you get, like child actors who give one really, really amazing performance, and then it drops off from there for one reason or another, and that didn't happen. I think she became a lawyer. I think.
I read that she had some online, she had invented some product and she was also selling it on a website or something. I don't know, but yeah, maybe both.
Interesting. I just want to mention real fast before we wrap up, the Hans Zimmer score. Hans Zimmer co-wrote the score. And in the beginning, it's kind of eerie, tinkly, childlike bells. And then once the dad's a monster, it's heavy organ.
And this is pretty early Zimmer, right? I mean, yeah.
88.
Yeah. I think it might be one of the first, because he co-composes, doesn't he? He's not.
Yes.
Yeah, with Stanley Myers.
But even so, I think it is like because again, you sort of the thing you were saying about the thing about Hans Zimmer's soundtracks is Hans Zimmer soundtrack when you hear one. And even then he's starting to experiment with that, isn't he? He's definitely giving that a go. So
that's so funny.
It's got a lot of kind of because Glenn Headley at that point wasn't famous. I think she made it probably just before Dirty Rotten Scoundrels came out, and that
Dick
was
Tracy is later on too.
Yeah, I knew her just because she was like, I was joking with Dave. I said this was the period where I was always getting her and Laurie Metcalf confused because they were doing a lot of American indie films in sort of similar roles. And then they're both in a terrible comedy called Stars and Bars that stars I think Daniel Day-Lewis that you will never see. He had done some like additional music for some earlier films, like some Nicholas Roeg movies in particular. But the first time that Zimmer is listed as an actual just composer, it might have been this one.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, Ian, we do numbers here at Table for One like we do in our regular reviews. So from 1 to 10, what would you give Paperhouse?
Well, it's interesting because I thought, based on memories, I probably would have given it an 8 from my memory of it because I really, really liked it. And when I was watching it again, I really, really enjoyed it until the end. I thought the final sequence when they're on the train and they go to their little holiday. I kind of thought it got a bit naff then. I kind of felt that didn't land. So I would probably have to take it down at least 1 point, I think. So I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. So I think it's really good. It's got a lot of good things in it. And the fact that it still stands up after such a long time and works so well, I was quite impressed by. But I just thought the ending was a bit honky, to be honest. I really thought it was a bit... It just didn't land for me. Because it sort of breaks the rules a little bit, and I didn't feel it kind of didn't really have the consistency. So until then, I was thinking, oh yeah, this is great. This is your thing, isn't it? About was it great or were you 8 kind of thing. And I was thinking, yeah, this is still great. This is still great. And then I thought, not so much. So yeah, I think I'll probably give it a 7 out of 10. I think.
Yeah, that's the question. Like, is the helicopter real? How do her parents know that she has run to the lighthouse? Like, of all the places in Devon, how do they know where they can't see her on the cliff? I guess you have to just go with it. The mom is like Deus Ex Machina who saves her from falling off the cliff. I guess I'll say a 7.6. Yeah, this was entertaining and does a lot with a little in terms of its visual effects and some good kid performances. So I liked it.
Yeah, I'm a 7.5. I kind of went with it at that point because the movie is so much playing with reality at that point. I'm like, okay, we got to get to the helicopter. Something's got to get us there. So I was cool with it. Just real quick to correct myself, Hans Zimmer had actually already been credited for both Insignificance and My Beautiful Laundrette in '85 and a couple movies before that. So he was already well on his way.
There you go. Ian, this was so much fun. Thank you for a really thoughtful conversation and a fun choice. And we appreciate all your support. See you soon.
Thank you very much.